Hello and welcome back to Genesis Designs and Modelcraft, and a very warm welcome to part 1 of more modelling for beginners, where we are going to build this Airfix P-51 Mustang kit together. I know there are a few of you out there that are champing at the bit to join in and get on with this kit, so here we go with part 1. Now, first and foremost, this is the kit I'm using. If there's anybody out there that wants to join in and play along, I got this one from www.modelsforsale.com, and they are almost all gone at this point. There are only 2 left, which are this boxing, exactly the same kit but slightly different finishing. So jump on that if you want to join in, or see if you can find a kit elsewhere. Obviously other retailers do sell Airfix kits. So the series as a whole then is not aimed at complete pure basic beginners. This isn't a my first model kit sort of tutorial. This is a little step up from the Mosquito series I've already done. A little bit more complication being added in the form of a small amount of fairly simple, very simple aftermarket, and a little bit more complex paint scheme which an airbrush will be required for. So it is aimed at people who have built a few models and are looking to maybe just raise their game a little bit. So beginners in that sense rather than absolute beginners. So here's the kit. Now firstly, this is not my first P-51. I'm a long way from a P-51 spurt, or indeed a massive fan. I'm neither. I've always been left really rather cold by P-51s, to be absolutely honest. And I know that's the kind of comment that loses a person's subscribers, but there you go. So here's one I built earlier. I've got 2 to show you. This one was built from a Meng kit. And it is a beautiful kit, to be honest. It came out to a fair bit of fanfare because it features a sort of a snap together construction for ease, for beginners, amusingly enough. But it was really quite expensive, as I recall at the time. It has been released in several different boxings, and honestly, if you want a nice model Mustang on your shelf and you don't want to put too much effort into it, this is a good shout. That clip together construction negates most of the fuselage seams, the way they've designed the parts. It's done in a way to make construction and hiding of seams really easy. So this one I did pick up. I found a cheap one. Funnily enough, it was Models for Sale that I got it from, and I just built it really quickly, straight from the box, no messing. I have added some photo etch belts, I can see that through the canopy there, but this is from the box. This is what you got, including the decals, and this has been finished using natural metal finish style paints, which is what we're going to use on the Airfix kit that we're about to start on. It's a really nice kit and it's well worth a look. As I say, if you fancy a Mustang model, can't vouch for its accuracy one way or the other, to be honest with you. The other one I've built is a little bit different. This is a Tamiya kit. Yeah, I know. I did a what if. So this was I'm really a really big fan of seaplanes, flying boats and seaplanes. And I started a special interest group here in the UK called the Splash SIG, which is all about float planes and flying boats. And this was built for the Telford display, whichever particular year this was. And the design brief in my mind was, what if the Schneider Trophy races had continued properly post-war instead of becoming a sort of handicap race for Cessnas. You might have seen things like this. You might well have seen some things like this where powerful piston engine fighter planes from the war were modified into float planes. So this is the Tamiya F-51 kit, actually. Again, built literally straight from the box, but obviously I did a few mods. The floats are from a Mackie kit, Smur 1/48 Mackie kit, and I widened them because they were clearly too small and they look wonky in the video, but they're not. I clipped the tail planes, I clipped the main planes, as you can see, and the propeller is from a Spitfire 22/24, an Airfix kit, and it fits. It's actually a perfect fit, and it really suits the aeroplane as well. How to soak up the extra horsepower from that tuned Merlin without having a larger propeller, which would, you know, get caught in the spray. Just more blades. So there you go. This was a little bit of just a few light modifications and a nice paint job. But this is the Tamiya kit. So really, if you wanted to follow this build using a Tamiya or a Meng or a Hasegawa or any other P-51 kit, you absolutely could. No problem. Everything that, all the techniques and everything that you see in this series could be related to any other kit, but obviously the specifics that come out will only be relevant to the Airfix kit. Right then, let's get started, shall we? Tools wise then, quick look at tools. You will need nippers, some half decent nippers that are fine pointed nippers are the way forward. These are God Hand, these aren't the most expensive ones, these are the moderately priced ones. These are the Tamiya. You will need some tweezers, some scalpelage of some form. I use the Swan Morton. As you can see, there's a curved blade option and a straight blade option. These are number 11 and number 15 in a number 3 handle. Sanding materials. These are just cut down skinny sanding sticks, wet and dry, and then some sort of foam sander. These are the Infini sanders, which are supplied from Premium Hobbies. Those are the basic tools. Adhesive wise, we will be using liquid cement. This is Tamiya Extra Thin Rapid and Mr. Cement S from Gunsey in there, and super glue or cyano. This is the one I'm using at the minute. Just some cheap and cheerful stuff off eBay, I think, and then if needs be, I've also got the AK Black Widow black super glue. To go with the super glue, we've got accelerator and ordinary household talcum powder. This is Deluxe Materials Rocket Blaster. This is really excellent, doesn't melt the plastic, it's quite benign for the kit, not so much for your lungs, but I think that's the case with all accelerators. And the talcum powder in that small container is this, which I bought for £1 about 20 years ago. On top of that, we're going to find that we need cocktail sticks. Here we go, cocktail kits, just cocktail sticks, just any old cocktail sticks, stir sticks of the kind that you may or may not find at a coffee shop, spatulas, known as tongue depressors in the medical trade. Again, the ones I have, I bought a big box of them many years ago. And then cotton buds. That's the basics. There will be other tools and I'll introduce them as and when they get used. So, let's get going. What do we need to start with? I will, for this build, broadly speaking, follow the instructions because it is meant for less experienced modelers, so I don't want to go off the beaten track too much. But where I see a clear advantage to not follow the instructions, I will not follow them and make it clear to you as to why I'm not following them. Alright then, let's get cracking and get some of these parts snipped off and get things started. And straight away I find we have a teaching point in in part D37, which is this seat frame part, and you can see looking at it on the frame how it does have quite a fine attachment point, but it's right on the middle of that relatively fragile span. Now note over here, I've already cut it free, but I've cut it quite a long way away from the part, and the reason I do that is just to reduce the stress a little bit on the part, because if you're not careful how you cut this, can you see how I can bend that quite happily? You need to release this side first so that when you cut this side the stress has got somewhere to go and you don't break said cross member. And that's really one of the huge advantages with using the fine pointed nippers, because they don't need such a large area to work in, and they don't create such a lot of stress on the part when they cut, because the angle that the actual cutting surface creates is relatively minimal. I'm going to utilise the same principles here with the control column. I'm going to carefully cut away at the grip end first, because now that's free to move, rather than trying to cut that way and it will push and potentially break the column. Just hold it up away and then cut the rest. Easy peasy. And here we are, 5 minutes in, with a kit of parts that's going to cover completely the first page of the instructions. Now, on a larger, more complicated model, you probably wouldn't want to do this because you may get confused as to which part is which. But in this case, all of the parts are readily identifiable, even after they've been cut off. So it's absolutely fine to cut everything off in one go. And the tolerance for this is going to vary from modeller to modeller. If you're not confident you're going to remember what each piece is and where it needs to go using this, then get them painted and build in smaller sub-assemblies and work your way along. It will take longer, but that's fine because it's not a race, is it? Okay, so I'm going to spend a few minutes then cleaning these parts up. So by that I mean removing all the little stubs that have been left by the process of cutting the part away from the frame. And whilst I do that, I always have a good check around the part. I look for ejector pin marks or any scores or nicks in the mould, anything like that that needs to be got rid of for a good finish. So this seat back part has got let me get my tweezers, a little nodule in the mould there on the side, and I'm going to remove that. I'll get one of my sanding sticks and I'll just hold it flat up the side of the part. And sand the thing flush. I'll do the same on the other side while I'm here. Then to finish it off, get my straight scalpel and I'm going to hold it at an angle, bevel it and just scrape gently sort of downwards and along and create these little threads of plastic, and that will just very, very slightly bevel this edge, take the sharpness away from it, which does look better and it's easier for paint to stay on there, like so. Now anyone who's right now sitting there going, well yeah, but it's just the side of the seat, you'll never see that. That's absolutely true, you won't. It doesn't matter at all. But this is attention to detail, and sometimes little bumps and divots in the mould like that do matter. They can affect the fit of the part, and sometimes they can do it quite drastically. So building the habit into your modelling of carefully checking the parts as you clean them up and removing things like that right from the get-go could easily save bother, and it will improve the quality of your models generally. Now, with the flat side of the nipper towards the part, I get quite close up, just nip the sprue stubs off, and then I use my straight blade again. Despite appearances, this is still quite a sharp one. and trim the tiny remnants of that sprue gate away. And I generally just as well, using the same sort of beveled scraping method, I'll nip round the edge of the part because there's usually a little bit of an angle on the edges from the mould seam. Clean and tidy that up, and just on the top surface, because that will be quite visible, just give it just a little tickle with the sanding stick to make sure every trace of that sprue stub is gone. And that's one part prepared, and I'm going to go through all of these parts and do the same thing to every single one of them. So I have all these pieces cleaned up, no bother there really. Tiny bit of flash on this, but just trimmed that off as part of the cleaning up process. Nothing to really worry about. And you can see that I've also removed the fuselage halves from the sprue. Now the reason I did that is because this part here, this is A11, really forms the backbone of the internal construction for the whole thing. And there was quite a lot of flash, and it's kind of needed quite a lot of cleaning up down the sides. So I thought I'll take these off the sprue as well, and just to make sure that it's all going to go together okay. In other words, to gauge how much effort I needed to put into cleaning all of this up. And the answer is, in terms of getting the fuselage halves together like this, not too much honestly. But here, this area here of the part actually sticks through and becomes the very rear. So you've got the roof of the radiator duct and the very rear part included in that internal thing. Now don't get too upset about the fit right now, because obviously nothing's being held by glue, but you can see how that's all a little bit rough around the edges, and you probably heard the sound it made. It's all a little bit tight. So whilst it's still in this stage, before you've even got any paint on it and everything's nice and easy to get at, you need to do is just make sure and clean up, properly clean up this edge here. Don't know if it shows how uneven and irregular that is. Both sides, clean that edge up and clean these upper edges up as well, and using the tip of the scalpel just tidy up these notches. So using an appropriate sanding board, if you can get one in, which you can't really, so we'll use the scalpel. Also you could use a file if you wanted. If you don't have sanding sticks and you'd rather use a file, go ahead and use a file. The thing with doing it like this is you can bridge it across both parts, so it should take it all down in a level manner. And I'm well aware that doing this is likely to induce a gap when we're finished, but I'm not too worried about that. That same beveled scraping action is to clear that corner off, and I'm going to use the tip of this blade just to clean that angle out at the back. Like so. And then down the front, use the scalpel blade just to take the lumps and bumps off. Again, if you prefer a file, I've got my files here. This is just a cheap set of needle files, and as you can see from the state of them, I've owned them for a long time. They don't tend to wear out when you're only using them on plastic. You can set a flat file along that front edge, just square it all up, basically, that's what I'm saying. Do a few passes, have a quick look to see how it's going, and I'm looking for that whole surface to be level. which when you catch it in the light you can see if there's any shiny spots that you're not level. Alright, that looks better. Getting a little bit far from the camera. Alright, there we go, that's much cleaner. Note with a flat file there's usually one edge that's got teeth on and one edge that hasn't, so make sure you use the edge that hasn't got teeth up against the part. So you're not creating a nice channel there that's not needed. Then take this corner off and take that corner off. And then tidy up at the back here. Like so. Maybe not immediately obvious, but that should look a bit tidier. And now, if I just attempt to offer that all up again, this time I'm hoping, fingers crossed, because clearly I haven't been able to test this theory, because if I'd tested it I wouldn't be able to show it to you, but you can now see that we're still not using glue. But that does now sit much nicer in its aperture. It's not really fitting nicely around the back here, but we'll worry about all of that later. But yeah, there you go. Much improved, to the point where that is not going to need too much effort with filler, as long as we can get the rest of it to fit nicely. So now that all these parts are prepped up and ready to start using, the next step would be to look at the painting process and see what colours each thing needs to be and start painting normally. But we're going to chuck some aftermarket into the mix. So now, because that includes a cockpit area set, what we need to actually do is check the instructions of our cockpit parts. So we've got the 3D printed decal set. This is the Edward Space set. 3D printed sort of gel panel and placards and whatnot. And then we've got some photo etched seat belts. So if we consult the instructions of the set, there's two jobs that we need to do before we can actually carry on and start thinking about paint. We need to remove the raised detail from the instrument panel here, and we need to remove the seat belts, the moulded in seat belts from the seat. So at this point, if you're not confident that you're going to make this photo etch work, then don't do it, leave the moulded ones in, because with this part in particular, this is the seat back. Removing those moulded on seat belts isn't going to be that difficult, but we are going to have to reinstate some of the well, not reinstate it because it isn't currently there, is it? We're going to have to scribe that seat back cushion so that there's not some big flat areas when we put the photo etch belts on. The lap straps, it's just going to be a simple matter of snipping them away from this frame. That's not too hard. And then the main instrument panel, all of this raised detail needs to go. And the way I do that, and this is just me, there are multiple ways. You can use a sanding stick or similar, and you can sit and you can sand it all off, and it will take a minute. But what I tend to do actually is use my scalpel to get the worst of it away. If you're going to do this, this is a fresh blade now, please be careful, but simply just use the blade and shave it down. I'm just trimming it. Don't try and take too much off at once, because that's going to encourage slippages, which will then cause other damage to the part, which we don't want. and just slowly, gradually, patiently trim all the detail off like that. The other way you can use the scalpel to do this is with the curved edge, and be really careful if you're going to try this, because the opportunity to stab yourself is quite high. You can use it like a chisel and just literally work your way at it like this. And in reality, you tend to use a combination of the two because of access. You can chisel it and still have it in your hands. And I mean, maybe you can see that with this, the edge in this orientation, it's actually a little bit easier to get in. But as I say, the opportunity for semi-fatal scalpel injuries is quite high, so be careful of that. I'll just trim these back and then I'll be back with you. Trimming operations are complete then. Here's the instrument panel. All that detail's gone, and as you can see, I've not sanded it. That is purely just sliced off with the scalpel, and it's left quite a nice clean surface. It's plenty good enough for our purposes. We don't need to worry about sanding it as well. And here is the seat. Now, without those moulded in belts, do you see how the seat cushion now is missing loads of crisscrosses where the belts used to be? So we're going to have to put those back in, because if we don't put them in, when you fit the photo etch belts, there's a chance of the lack of detail being visible somewhere. So if I'm going to dance with death here, I'm going to zoom down some, and I'm probably then going to immediately work off camera, because this is quite far onto the bench for me now. So initially I'm going to use my scriber. This is an Alpha P-Cutter 800. There is a smaller version available, marketed by Tamiya, if you don't fancy wielding a great big scriber. And I'm just going to start by picking up these lines and just making the beginning of a line through where the belts have gone and the detail is no longer there. Literally just want to score the beginnings of that line in. Not worried about getting it full depth. And then I'm going to use my razor saw, and this is a relatively advanced tool, but it is one of those tools that when you've got one you wonder how you ever managed without it. This is a JLC version. They're relatively expensive, I won't lie. I don't know how much these are now. I don't know if they're even still available, but there you go. That's what it looks like. You can see why it's called a razor saw. The blades, I don't have any separate ones in there. Yes, I do. I like old-fashioned razor blades. And you have a very, very fine thread cutting teeth on one side and slightly coarser cutting teeth on the other. The thickness is the same, but the teeth per inch is different. In this kit, if these are still available, you also get some spacers and some extra screws. These are the spacers and the extra screws, so that you can create a stack of blades to do multiple lines at once with them should you need to. It is also possible to get other razor saws and photo etch saws with or without handles that will do this job. So I've just put the beginning of that line in there, because razor saws aren't the best at maybe creating a perfect line initially. And then I'm going to use the saw, and I'm using the fine side. I'm also utilising the rest of the line, just to deepen that down to match the rest. So we now have uninterrupted detail across that area, and this is simply a case of continuing to do that until the full crisscross effect is established again. In fairness, this is going away a little bit from what you could call basic modelling. This does require quite a deft touch, and in fairness also, I think you could get away with not doing it if you felt like it was going to be a problem. But at the same time, there's not really any harm to be done from having a go at just popping that detail back in. And a few minutes later, this is what we have. All the crisscrosses are back, but they do look a little bit messy, I think you'll agree. And I've already scrubbed them a bit. So this is a place where you can get an old toothbrush involved, or something similar, and just give it a scrub to get some of that plastic debris out of those grooves. And then to finish off, get your liquid cement. This is Mr. Cement S, but the type really doesn't matter, and paint it in all these lines, and the glue will dissolve all the little scruffy little pieces of plastic and dust that are sitting in all those lines, and it will also very, very slightly soften the corners of all these crisscrosses, which I think it's supposed to represent stitching, so it doesn't really need to be quite so sharp. Just paint it across and it will just neaten up all those edges, all those little scrubbly bits. Don't flood it, clearly. That'll just ruin it. And you should end up with something that looks a little bit like that. Nice neat seat cushion recreated. So there's the seat cushion and the instrument panel. Put the saw away. I haven't yet done the lap straps because I want to assemble the seat a little bit to make sure on how that's going to fit, so as to figure out where to cut it. So I need the seat pan here, and obviously if I had fitted that before now, I'd have struggled massively to get this detail sorted. So the seat pan simply glues into this area here. So put an overly generous blob of liquid cement in there so it stays wet for long enough to introduce the seat, like so. Squish it together with my tweezers to make sure it's properly home. And then belt and braces. I'll just pop a little bit of glue around the edges. I know it's glued. There we go. So that's the seat pan fitted onto the seat, and now with that in place, I can test fit this piece to see where or how it sits together, so I can figure out where exactly to cut the seat belts, because as you can see now that I've put that on, if it will stay in place, the seat belts themselves form a part of that structure. So I'm going to cheat a little bit, and sometimes we have to do this. Cut it just inside the arm. Just going to snip it with the nippers. Same the other side. So that should give me enough of a ledge for it to still attach down to that seat pan properly. Thus, I'll just put a tiny dab of glue each side, and again that glue will melt and soften those cut edges a tiny bit so they look a little less incongruous. I'm left-handed tweezing now, this is dangerous. and then after the fact pop some glue in the back to hold the whole thing in place. And that is the seat together, ready to accept the photo etch belts. I'll get rid of that. I've also glued together these radio boxes, communications equipment, whatever it is. I've glued those onto that rack. That is, and this is as far as the assembly is going to go until we've added paint now. So this is all the parts laid out. Got your main cockpit tub area, back of the seat, the control column, instrument panel, the backing part, this radio and rack, the pilot's seat, and these rudder pedals. So this part here is step 4. As you can see here, everything's going to be black, so I've glued them together because there's no harm in doing so. So now comes the time to identify what colour each of these parts needs to be painted. So the last part then, if we go back to the aftermarket instructions, and this is probably one of the hardest or the most annoying things about using aftermarket, is having to constantly cross-reference the instructions so as not to miss a step. So here is a piece of photo etch. This is here a piece of photo etch which needs to be added to this area of the instrument panel part, and that needs to be done before putting any paint on. So the last thing we're going to do before starting to put paint on these things is add that piece of photo etch, and that is part 26. Now the photo etch fret does have numbers on it. You can clearly see the piece we want. So to get this part separated from the fret, use the number 15 blade, or any blade that's got a rounded point like this one does. And you need also a hard surface. You can by all means cut photo etch parts off on your cutting mat, but you'll bend everything all out of shape doing it. So you need a hard back. So this is just a piece of sort of 1.5mm plastic card. Using the end of your blade, the tip, find the edge of the part. When you found it, simply press down. Hear the click. That's cut through. Don't pull it, don't try and cut it, just press it down. That's those two. That's the third one. Now hold it down with another finger. Be easier if I turn it around. Hold the part down with the finger so you don't ping it off into oblivion. Now that we've scuffed all that detail off, we need this. Push down. And that's our part separated with zero distortion and really no fuss. Now this part needs to be bent slightly to fit the instrument panel. And what they want us to do is to bend this part here. This is the compass platform upwards apart from the rest of it. You do not need a photo etch bending tool to do stuff like this, especially smaller parts like this anyway. This is a pair of beading pliers from Hobbycraft. Anything like this, but you want something reasonably good quality. It's got straight flat edges. And you need to grab your part so that the piece you want to bend sticks out. And the flat edge of these pliers is forming the area that needs to be folded. Like that. I'm left-handed pliering now, which is just as deadly. And then use your tweezers and simply bend the part. I don't know exactly how much bend it needs, but the bend is started, so the part will tend to continue to bend where that bend has been started. Offer the thing up squidge it into position so you can see where the bend needs to go, and that's it there like that, and it won't focus. It's in position, so we know it fits now. So now we need to glue it on. You can use this stuff to glue photo etch on. It's actually really good and it will hold it, but I tend to use super glue most of the time. So I've just got a piece of plastic at the side of the desk that I always use as a super glue palette, and I've tipped a bit of super glue onto that. I'm going to paint it with this cocktail stick into the area where that piece of photo etch needs to go, like so. So there's now a layer of super glue on that, and at this point you need to work fast because the brass, this photo etch will make that go off real quick as soon as it touches it. Push it into position. Make sure it's where you want it, because penny to a pound it will always grab where you don't want it to. And a little bit of excess glue is squeezed out of the top, so I'm just going to wipe that off with a bit of tissue. And that is our little piece of photo etch installed. It really is as simple as that. If you want to, once the piece is in position, it can be beneficial sometimes to run super glue in on this edge, on the edge of the part like this, and then clean it up again afterwards. Helps to hold the edge down and stops it having that tendency just to peel off quite so easily. But this is very much an optional step. Right, now with the instrument panel sorted, our little bit of photo etch is firmly super glued in place. I did go ahead and tidy up the plinth here between the two parts so it matches the top of the photo etch a little better. Just tidied it up, and I've tidied up at the sides with actually just scraped it a bit with the end of the 15 blade to clear up that super glue that I added. So these parts are all ready to paint, all trimmed, nicely finished and ready to go. So now I need to look at the colours required. So Airfix say colour number 226, so clearly that's Humbrol. I've got no idea, my Humbrolpedia is so out of date, so I do have a selection of colour charts in a drawer. If I consult said chart, 226 it says is interior green. However, I could be wrong, don't think I am, but I believe 226 interior green is supposed to be British interior green. Not sure. Either way, I don't have Humbrols. Maybe it's 76 actually is the one they normally use for British stuff, isn't it? I don't have 226. I don't use Humbrol. So what I do use, let's put that back in the drawer, is Tamiya Gunzisano acrylic and Mr. Colour lacquer, and then I've got some SMS, some AK and some Mr. Paint lacquers. I don't have in US interior green in anything other than Mr. Hobby, which is the acrylic version, and it's H58 for US interior green World War II. The only other colour that's really popping up here on any of these parts is Humbrol 85, which is satin black. Black is black when you're talking about interiors, doesn't matter. My go-to everyday black is Tamiya XF85. So we're going to play a little game now, because I know not everybody uses Mr. Colour, not everybody, or Mr. Hobby I should say, not everybody has access to Mr. Hobby, but nearly everybody has access to Tamiya acrylics. So what if we mix up some US interior green out of Tamiya acrylics, because there is no Tamiya acrylic colour off the shelf for US interior green. But I did hear a vicious rumour once upon a time that US interior green is in fact simply zinc chromate yellow with some black added. So I thought it might be fun to try replicating that here for you. So here is Tamiya's zinc chrome mate yellow. They call it yellow green. It's XF4. And I'll get my XF85 and an empty X22 clear jar to mix it in. And let's see what we can do. So the first thing I want to do is test the concept, make sure it really works. My mind says it should do, but let's test it before we commit to tipping paint everywhere. I'll just test it in one of these pipette shallows. I'll get some of this yellow green on a brush and pop it in here. There's my black. Black's already thinned. Chuck some of that in, mix it up. There's too much black straight away, but let's just bung some more yellow in it. And I don't think that looks too bad at all. Here's the Mr. colour in comparison. It's a tiny bit darker, but you know, we can go backwards and forwards. We just put a touch more black back in that. If anything, it probably wants a touch of blue. No, that pretty much matches now. It's not a perfect match to the H58, but it isn't far off for something that's just going to be chucked on the inside of a model. I don't know about you, but that would do me. So there you go. If you can't get hold of H58 and you don't fancy going out and buying a specific colour to paint the inside of your American aircraft, and especially if you do have XF4, or if you can just nip down the local Hobbycraft or whatever and grab an XF4, you can make your own just by chucking black in it. Easy as that. So if I replicate that now in larger amounts, I've mixed this up. This is much thicker than the black because it isn't pre-thinned. Top tip with pouring, if you use something like this paint spatula, if I get myself a bit more in the middle, and put it on there, on the edge of the thing you're pouring, it does pour a lot more nicely. Don't need gallons of it. You'll note that I'm not measuring this. I never do. Some of you might hate me for that. I'm a little bit gash. I'll just chuck stuff in there until it works, and if it doesn't work, I'll chuck it away. Let's not go mad with the black straight away, just a touch of it. There we go, pretty much cracked it straight off. There's probably about 3-to-1 black yellow, roughly. But you can see how easy that is, just to dab a bit of this, a bit of that, and we've ended up with a usable paint colour there for the interior of our Mustang. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to tidy these up. And I'll label this. Bit of 18mm over that. US inked green XF4 plus XF85. So that'll go in my drawer of mixed up paints, but because I've actually bothered to label it, I won't be left wondering next time I pull them out what on earth I made it for. And that's it. Here we are with these parts. This is just for steps 1 through 10 on your instruction manual, all prepped. The aftermarket parts are dealt with, sorted the seat out ready for the photo etch belts, and mounted the parts ready for painting. And I realised this is something that some people do struggle with. So all I've done, I made the decision to glue the rudder pedal assembly pod thing. So this is part number D32. I've taken the decision to glue that to this internal part because it doesn't cause me any issues to paint around anything by doing so, and it saves me trying to figure out how to hold it. I can easily glue the instrument panel to the front of that later. So that's been attached to there. And then I've simply used blue tack. So these pieces need to be black, so these are on the same stick because they're both going to be black. And that instrument panel's blowing the focus out terribly. And it's never going to focus ever. So these pieces are just attached with little blobs of blue tack. It really isn't going to focus, so I'm going to stop holding it up. Attached with blue tack to the sticks, and these are the same. The control column and the seat attached by little blobs of blue tack onto the sticks. You're never going to see the bottom of the seat ever, so that's fine. And the base of this is hidden in this trench, but anyway, that will be a different colour with hand painting. Then this is the rearmost bulkhead that fits on the back of the fuel tank, and then this is the seat armour mounting plate bracket. And here, these two parts have got holes in them for mounting. So I've simply stuck a cocktail stick through the hole and pushed it through, not too hard because you don't want to distort the parts, until it holds it fairly firmly. And now you can spray these and you can hit every side, no problem at all. And when you've got your paint on and want to leave them to dry, you can stick them in something like my universal blue tack extra thin combo pot, like so. Another way to do that, where's it gone? I've got a block of plasticine, as you can see by the myriad of holes in the top that I stick things in there when they've been painted. And yet another way is to use that florist's foam stuff that you can get. There's that weird crunchy foam, and that you can stick sticks, cocktail sticks and skewer sticks into that very successfully to hold parts also. And if, like me, you're someone who likes to spend money on pointless tools when a piece of blue tack will suffice, you could go out and get some Mr. Super clamps from Guns with a little base that they pop into. These are just pieces of wire with a little alligator clamp on the end, and you know, you can hold your pieces in those and they can be stuck in the holes in the base and left to dry. It's an option, but it is entirely unnecessary, as you can see by the fact that mine has never been used because I always use a chunk of plasticine on my universal extra thin blue tack holder glue bottle combo. So that's it then for episode 1. If I go into getting the paint on these parts now, it's going to add another probably 15-20 minutes to the video, and will make it all far too unwieldy for my laptop to cope with the editing and rendering of. So I'll cut it there. In episode 2, we'll paint these parts using the homebrew mix for the interior green and the rubber black. For the black areas, we'll use some X22 to clear coat them, ready for washes and dry brushing and whatever weathering we think we want to do. And we'll busy ourselves with fitting these aftermarket parts and hopefully get this interior all assembled and ready for the next stages. So I'll look forward very much to doing that and bringing you along. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found it interesting, useful, or both. And with all of that said, I think it only remains for me to say until next time, look after yourselves, look after each other. Genesis out.